Well, today is the final sermon in our journey through Colossians. It's been a joy and a wonder to go through Colossians with you moment by moment, step by step, passage by passage, paragraph by paragraph, to highlight the words of Paul. And if you remember at the very beginning when I introduced this to you, the title of this theme that we'd be approaching this summer was the heartbeat of Paul's letters. The purpose of going through them was not to understand and better understand the arguments in the Greek text and be able to parse out every sentence that's there to better understand the architecture of it, but rather so that we might understand the man who's writing the letters and the people who he's writing it to and the love that flows from his pen. At the beginning, I also used this image of comparing a ruler and a flower and how each of them have their own ability to communicate something different. A ruler is great for practical matters and measuring pieces of wood or walls or whatever else, but a flower doesn't make a great hammer. Instead, it communicates something different. And it's not practically used, but rather as an extension of love and beauty, a way for us to express something that maybe a ruler just can't. As we've been going through this, I've been trying to, again, flesh out some of those undertones of Paul. And through that, I've tried to remind us that Paul in the letter of Colossians is trying to get one main thought across. And if we were to summarize all of Colossians, it would be this. Paul is encouraging the church to continue to become more mature in their faith through steady prayer and a faithful life, all with thanksgiving. All with thanksgiving. For Paul, it's about growing into maturity while also holding it together with this theme of thanksgiving or gratitude. And as we go through our reading today, I pray you'll see that this verse ties things together as Paul wraps up his letter to the Colossians. So let's start in Colossians 4, verse 2 through verse 4. Verse 2 starts, "Continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us, that God may open to us a door for the word, to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison, that I may make it clear, which is how I ought to speak." Last week, we talked about the movement Paul was making in his letters in terms of talking about the cosmic realities of this world, all the way down to the individual and back out. He goes from the things that have been laid up in heaven and the spiritual wisdom, then down into wisdom personified through Jesus Christ, who delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of light. That the same Jesus, the image of God who created all things invisible and visible, was the same Jesus who was crucified, died on the cross, and rose from the dead, that he would become the propitiation for the sins of the world. And by his blood, wash all who call him Lord clean. And then if we have been changed and see him as Lord, then we come to him proclaiming our allegiance and our life, but also by entering in through the works of baptism, allowing that God to unite himself into us and to transform our lives. And through transformation, then we go out and move from there. That we become different husbands or different wives and different masters, not according to the ways of this world, but according to the ways of the new reality that we live in. So Paul then takes a moment here to stop and not talk about the individual, the husband, the wife, the slave, the master, but instead then gets back out to the community and he asks them to pray. Prayer is the most fundamental thing a Christian is called to do. And a Christian is called to participate in. And Jesus modeled this often as he would go and find times to pray on his own, but also by teaching his disciples how to pray. And for this new community in Colossae, they're supposed to change their behavior and their actions, but more importantly, they need to be people of prayer. And Paul modeled this for them at the very beginning of his letter. Right? I am praying for you always or often. And now he's asking them to pray for him. N.T. Wright has an important comment on this, and he says this: No matter how senior or respected anyone is in the service of the gospel, they still need the prayers of the most apparently junior, humble, and insignificant Christian. I am speaking, of course, in worldly terms. In truth, no Christian is more or less senior or junior, significant or insignificant than any other in God's eyes. One of the most humbling and powerful things I've been given the authority to do, and part of my main role, is to absolve sins, to sit and listen to confessions, to remind people that they are forgiven and to absolve them of their sin. But I remember a very powerful moment in one of my times performing this rite. At the end of the rite, it ends with this, the priest saying to the confessor, "Pray for me, a sinner. Go in peace and pray for me, a sinner." And after this rite, and I was with someone, this person looked shocked and almost confused when I said this. And I said, "Wait, I'm supposed to pray for you? Wait, I just came to you to pray that you would forgive me of sins, and now you want me to pray for you?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I need your prayers." So the Book of Common Prayer reminds the priest and the penitent that even in someone who leads the Eucharist, or someone who's called to care for the souls of a community, or someone who is supposed to be holier than they are, still needs prayer. Because I'm not Jesus. And there's no way I could be. But even more importantly, the Book of Common Prayer doesn't allow any of us to come to any service with a spirit of better than, a spiritual greatness, saying, "I don't need to do this," or "I don't need to participate in this." That it actually doesn't allow you to skip past the parts in which you think you are okay in. Instead, every service, in every way, walks us through a moment of confession, takes us through prayer that we humbly seek after God, the one who can call his people, the one who can comfort them, the one who can guide them, and reminds us it is he and not I. And so Paul, in this moment, is modeling that for them. Someone who could be seen almost as a New Testament idol, someone who's going from city to city, evangelizing, starting city after city and church after church. He humbles himself and asks for prayer. He asks for prayer. And he asks them to do it and reminds them to be watchful in thanksgiving. To be watchful in thanksgiving. In the entire letter of Colossians, Paul actually uses this word 7 times. Right, no matter what Paul is calling the people of Colossians to do, or the things he's doing himself, he's ensuring that they do it with gratitude. He gives thanks for the people that he's writing to. He tells them to give thanks to the Father who has qualified them to share in the inheritance of the saints. That they should be rooted in Christ and established in the faith, abounding in thanksgiving. And having put on compassionate hearts and being ruled by the peace of Christ, and then to be thankful. To sing and admonish one another with thankfulness in their hearts. And that whatever you do in word or deed, to give thanks. This is much more than a simple platitude. It's much more than just saying that these people need to have an attitude of gratitude because it has a nice ring to it and it sounds cool. In our modern culture, we see people doing this all the time. And the thing I see them do, which sometimes makes sense and oftentimes doesn't, is the hashtag blessed. Right? At the beach, hashtag blessed. At home eating dinner, hashtag blessed. Put the shoe on the right foot, hashtag blessed. Went into thousands of dollars of debt to have this amazing dream vacation, hashtag blessed. Bawling my eyes out of my bedroom because my girlfriend just broke up with me for my best friend, hashtag blessed. Right? I just see it posted on everything and everywhere because that people just want to feel blessed and be blessed. But the purpose of being grateful is not to just say, "Oh, I'm happy in all things, I'm grateful in all things," but that it would become a very part of their being and then ooze out of them as they live their life that makes them look different. See, when we give thanks, it should not just be this passing comment or fleeting feeling. But our very being should be oozing with the heart of gratitude that leads us to contentment, appreciation, and love for those around us. Love for those around us. That when we give thanks, even in times where we have frustration or difficulty or even challenges with brothers and sisters in Christ, that when we give thanks, our hearts begin to change. In the same way, when Jesus says to pray for our enemies, Paul is showing us here that by loving our neighbor means to give thanks in everything. When I was a youth pastor, one of the things I do with our youth was to practice giving thanks. To practice giving thanks. We'd go through Compline, and when we got to the instructions to pray on our own, sometimes I would just say, hey, we're going to give thanks. Whatever comes to your mind, give thanks. That was a little challenging and a little hard because they're youth, so they're just thinking of everything. But they also thought of amazing things as well. They would say, thank you for chairs. Thank you for carpet. Thank you for running water. Thank you for flowers. Thank you for poetry. For cars, for streets, for clothes, for tile, for grout, for dogs, for cats, for trees, for pizza, for tacos, for my mom, for my dad, for my friends. On and on and on the list would go. Many silly, many serious. But it was out of this that I wanted them to recognize all things have been given to you by the love of God. And they're not for you to take advantage of, but rather to not use things, but give thanks for what God has done and what He has given to you, even in the small things. And to not take granted the things that we have in this world that make our lives easier or keep us healthy or whatever it is, but to say, God, thank you for this. And everything is done with the heart of thanksgiving. Our attitude and approach to all we do changes. It changes, and Paul knows this and constantly reminds the Colossians, give thanks. Just give thanks early. Abound in thanksgiving. And then Paul leads them into this very specific prayer that he would like them to pray. That doors would be open for evangelism. That doors would be open for evangelism. See, Paul is aware of his role and God's role in the work of evangelism. Paul's role was to go out and proclaim the gospel wherever he went. Didn't matter where he found himself, didn't matter what city it was, didn't matter if it was after a shipwreck or not. Wherever he was to proclaim the gospel. And it would look different in all the places he would go. But what he prayed is that the doors would be open. That doors would be open and God would lead them in the path that He would have. Because God's role was to work before He even got there. See, again, there's this cosmic and interpersonal reality that's happening all the time. Is that God is ruling and reigning, but even before I walk out those doors, God is working in somebody's heart and prompting them and knocking at their door. And then hopefully, maybe, I might see the fruit one day where I proclaim the gospel to someone and that light clicks. It's not me. It was God working before I even got there and probably many of conversations. But in that moment, He could use me. And the same way for Paul. Paul was wanting to be used wherever he went and looking for open doors. There's even times where he would go somewhere with a plan, an idea, and he would go inside of synagogues and no one would listen. And he said, fine, I'll go to those who don't know Jesus and don't know the Messiah, and had much more success there. There's times where he had plans and ideas of where to go, and then angels would come and stop him from going there because they said, no, this is not your path. Continue this way. By asking the people of Colossae to pray for him, he sets again an example in their own efforts to proclaim the gospel. That in all things they're giving prayer. That even before they go and tell someone else the good news of Jesus, they are praying. That they are praying daily. That they themselves would pray that the doors would be open for evangelism to happen. And this is one of my practices I do every single week. It's about a 5-minute drive from my house to Beyond Bread every Monday. I get in my car and I pray, Lord, would you help me meet somebody? Would you help me find someone to talk to? Would you even bring somebody to me that they would get past my ugly looking face and just come and say, this guy's not that scary and I can kind of talk to him. And it's happened. God's answered my prayers. And when I get done, I say, thank you, Lord. I don't know if I said anything helpful or not, but thank you for bringing this person. Thank you for the opportunity that I prayed for. In the same way, we need to pray for those opportunities and be watchful in thanksgiving. And again, Paul is making this connection between our attitudes that also matches our prayer. Let's look at verses 5 and 6. Paul says, walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. I could try to imagine going out into the world, anywhere I would go, thinking, if I have the best argument, then I will win. And I will intellectually win this conversation and win that person for Jesus. But no, I need to walk in wisdom. I need to walk in wisdom, to walk side by side with the Spirit, listening intently, so that the words I use may not be as salt to a wound, but a healing balm. That they wouldn't just cause a person harm or just think, man, this is just like every other Christian I know, but instead that I might have wisdom to make the best use of my time, to show them the love of Christ wherever I go. The world is looking for something different and something more meaningful, something more beautiful, something more desirable. People are longing to live in the image that they have been made in without knowing where to find that very image. So we ought to point people to Jesus with our lives, with the way that we speak, being ready to encounter anyone who comes with love, with charity, with wisdom, with graciousness, with thanksgiving. We are to become more mature in our faith through steady prayer and a faithful life, all with thanksgiving. It's all with thanksgiving. The church in Colossae needed to grow in maturity. They were brand new Christians. They didn't understand. They were going to try and figure it out, and they needed to grow. But we too, no matter how far we are in the faith, must continue to grow in maturity. Although sin and death has been defeated once and for all, Satan is still around, causing problems for God's people. He is still trying to steal the hearts and desires of all of God's creation and turn them away from Him. At the very heart, this temptation is no different today. The temptations they faced back in Colossae are the same temptations we face today, of pride, of vanity, of power. They just look a little different. One of the worlds in which our world tries to bring us comfort and peace is through the world of AI and ChatGPT, right? Through it, you can find any sort of financial advice you need, any counseling you would like, any information you would like that would help you answer questions, both important and non-important, to know more than your friends. They also might provide a hope for you because they have all the answers, to treat it like a crystal ball to solve all of our problems. That when we have a difficulty, we first go to this computer instead of the living God. In all that we do, we must seek Christ. We must seek to grow in maturity in our faith through steady prayer. That our first answer would be prayer. That I wouldn't be floundering around and looking for the right answer in whatever this world might have, but to seek Christ in all things. We must live a different life. We must live a different life that has been changed by the power of God. We must know His word and to parse out the lies and deceits of this world so we would not be taken captive and we would bring life and help free those who have been. We must always put on compassionate hearts, with thanksgiving as a means of evangelism and faithful living in a dark, hopeless world. We are to become more mature in our faith through steady prayer and a faithful life, all with thanksgiving. What would it look like if you did everything with thanksgiving? How would your relationships change at home if you said thank you even for the small things? You meant it. Or what about your workplace if you started to, instead of hounding the people that you work with for the different projects, to say thank you for the work that they have done and encourage them in meaningful ways? How would your life look different if it was lived out of generosity? So may we, together, continue to grow in our faith through steady prayer and a faithful life, all with thanksgiving.